It was with the words, Terry took death's arm and followed him through the doors and onto the black desert under the endless night. The end. That Sir Terry Pratchett's death was announced on his own Twitter feed. I spoke to Sir Terry in 2011 after his documentary Choosing to Die was shown on BBC Two, which showed millionaire Peter Smedley, who had motor neuron disease, end his life. He spoke about the emotions of being there when Peter died.
Really, it was because of the incongruity of everything. Because you think a man's died, and that's a bad thing. But this is a man that wanted to die. So is that a good thing? When you watch him, as we did, and we met him on a number of occasions, he was emphatic in that he wanted to die. While he never had a bad word to say about care, he said he did not want care. He did not, in a phrase I used elsewhere, he did not want to spend any more time than necessary in the mouth of the lion.
And what was also interesting, of course, because Sir Terry having Alzheimer's, that's a different situation from somebody with a terminal disease, isn't it? Because when the time comes that you would maybe want to end your life, you are no longer able to make that decision.
Yes, probably, yeah.
You summed it up in one phrase, and I think you used it a couple of times when you said, "Who owns your life?"
Yes.
Because there was an old play, wasn't there, years ago, whose life is it anyway? The greater good of society or the choice of an individual? But that's it, isn't it? Who owns your life? That's what you firmly believe.
Indeed. And people have tried to say, for example, that if we would allow, as it were, another Peter Smedley to die with the help of a physician, I would sincerely hope, in the UK, that would send a message to everyone else with the same disease that, you know, their life was more or less forfeit, it wasn't worth living. But I think this is made up. I mean, I'm in touch with lots of people with early onset Alzheimer's, and we discuss this sort of thing, and they say, well, if any one of us manages to escape this bloody disease, which really, you know, it grinds you down to the core, I think the rest of us would be envious.
How are you finding it at the moment, the yourself, the Alzheimer's?
The problems I have mostly can be solved with technology. But I'm well aware that, you know, because I've investigated things, that when in another year or so, it's going to get really bad, or start getting really bad. And I know stories of people with Alzheimer's who've actually attacked members of their family and done all kinds of horrible things, and indeed had horrible things done to them. And nothing is their fault. You know, you do not know what's happening in the cockpit now that most of the pilot is dead.
Not there anymore.
And that's something you don't want to be there for.
No.
I think, unusually among the other diseases, you can't really say to someone with Alzheimer's, well, just, you know, wait till the end. Because with Alzheimer's, the end is getting worse and worse and worse and worse and worse, and there's going to be less and less of you to appreciate that.
And less of you to make that decision.
To make any decision.
Yeah.
So what you're saying, that your head's in the mouth of the lion, and we're gonna pat the lion.
StephenBriggs was Sir Terry's co-writer and friend for 20 years. Stephen, good morning.
Good morning, Hickey.
Commiserations.
Yeah, thank you.
Tell us about Sir Terry.
He was a great bloke, in my view. Masses of fun working with him for the last 25 years. You know, funny, loyal, supportive, waspy. A bloke could always be relied on to be honest about everything. That's like in your interview.
Yes, and a tremendous body of work.
Absolutely fantastic.
Was any of the pilot still there towards the end?
I think, as he said, the pilot was definitely leaving the cockpit towards the end. And I think one of the sad things about Alzheimer's, isn't it? as you said in the interview, as he said in the interview, that you get to a point where we all of us think we'd like somebody to flick the switch before we get to that point where we're just beyond that stage. But the trouble is, you just get to that point where when you're this side of the door, you don't want the switch flicked. And then the second you've stepped through the door, you're no longer able to make the decision yourself. And I think, what he would have liked, as we know, he'd like to be sitting in his garden drinking a brandy and listening to Thomas Tallis on his iPod. But that didn't happen.
When did you last see him?
A couple of weeks ago, and he was poorly then. And it's sad to see somebody that you've known for so long and who has always, for the majority of that time, been such a bright, active, fizzy, personality. It's a shame to see them going like that.
Was there any recognition at all, or was he?
Yes, there was, and that's quite.
Oh, right, okay.
It's gratifying, isn't it? But,
yeah.
But
how did he express that?
I mean, you could tell in the look of his face, and you could tell in the things he said. But he was already having difficulty with pulling words together, and you could sense the frustration. Having, like in your interview, having spoken to him about the same things, you knew that the same Terry Pratchett was in there, and probably struggling with the controls to try and make the rest of him do what he wanted him to do, but it just wasn't working.
You could tell from reading his books, from talking to him, I had the privilege of being able to do that.
Yeah.
And as I say, reading his works, and also his compassion when he did that remarkable documentary. And also that beautiful thing he did, as I was just mentioning, with orangutans. You could see his soul and his spirit coming out there with our fellow primates. I found that deeply moving. Did you?
Yeah, he was a great humanist, and he did feel very strongly about orangutans. It was he and I both supported them. Me through the royalties and the plays, and Terry through donations and the support work he's done. And yes, it's a very indicative thing of his character. I think
when you see somebody making such a connection with our fellow species, it says something about someone. Do you not agree?
Yeah. Yes. He had a strong sense of right and wrong, what was right for people and for other species, yes.
Well, thank you so much for talking to us, Stephen. A really difficult time for you, but your words were very moving. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Nicky.
Stephen Briggs, Sir Terry's co-writer and friend of 20 years. We're going to be discussing Alzheimer's later on because of this. Diagnosed with dementia. How do you cope? Alzheimer's. How are you coping? This is because, Sir Terry Pratchett was a great... what's the right word here? He was a great, I suppose, advocate of knowing about the disease, of facing up to the disease, of people understanding the disease. He spoke about it. He got huge praise for articulating what he was going through and talking about what he was going to go through as well. And that praise is absolutely worthy.